In my last video covering A Cardiologist Examines Jesus by Dr. Franco Serafini, I spoke about the lead investigator for the miracles in Buenos Aires, Dr. Ricardo Castanon Gomez. Specifically, I said that Dr. Castanon Gomez invented the Eucharistic miracles of Buenos Aires by testing into compliance, the practice of retesting until the desired result is obtained. At the end of the video, I said the following. I'm going to make a separate video to cover this, but I think that Dr. Castanon Gomez is a complete nut. In this video, I want to talk about who Dr. Castanon Gomez is and why, if I were still a practicing Catholic, I would want Dr. Castanon Gomez to stay as far away as possible from any miracle that I wanted to be legitimately investigated. I think it would be wise for me to start this video discussing character assassination. I don't think that a critique of this video that I'm making now, in which somebody was saying that I was assassinating the character of Dr. Castanon Gomez, would be entirely unfair. I think that I will be maybe doing a little bit of character assassination in this video to some small degree. And I need to say right now that by character assassination, I am not saying that Dr. Castanon Gomez is a bad person, just a nutty person, akin to a young earth creationist or a flat earther or something like that, though I don't think that he's as nutty as a flat earther. And for the record, I was a young earth creationist still for most of my life, so I don't think that it's unfair for me to call somebody as nutty as I used to be. Anyway, you'll see what I mean as I get further into this video. But one more note about character assassination is that I agree that character assassination has no place in science. Science is all about the science, not the scientist. So the work that Dr. Castanon Gomez has done on these miracles should speak for itself, right? The work should speak for itself. No need for me to talk about how nutty or not nutty the scientist himself might be. Not so fast. Dr. Castanon Gomez doesn't do science as much as he does apologetics. Dr. Castanon Gomez hasn't ever published his work in any kind of scientific journal article, and his work has never been peer-reviewed, not as far as I can tell. Once Dr. Castanon Gomez starts publishing his work in peer-reviewed journal articles, then I can stop worrying about Dr. Castanon Gomez himself. After his work has been peer-reviewed, I won't have to worry about the scientist behind the science. I can only worry about the science itself at that point. But we haven't gotten to that point yet. His work has never been peer-reviewed. So, for now, I do have to worry about the scientist behind the science. So, without further ado, it seems like Dr. Castanon Gomez's quackery began before his conversion to Catholicism. Now, biographies or descriptions of Dr. Castanon Gomez tend to make a big deal about his conversion to Catholicism from the atheism of his youth. If you try to Google information about Dr. Castanon Gomez, you tend to find stuff like this. Here is a parish website, some church just called St. Mary's, and this parish website has a very short biography of Dr. Castanon Gomez here. It says St. Mary's will be hosting Dr. Ricardo Castanon Gomez, PhD, for a special talk on Eucharistic miracles. Dr. Gomez was an atheist scientist who was asked to lead a team of scientists to examine a Eucharistic miracle in Buenos Aires, Argentina, by then Archbishop Jorge Bergoglio, now Pope Francis. What Dr. Gomez discovered was so powerful, he has since converted and now tours the world speaking about the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. This, to me, seems like it really implies that the conversion happened in part because of the Eucharistic miracles. We'll see that that's not quite the case. And you can see a similar claim made here. This next one comes from the Magis Center. This is a PowerPoint presentation that the Magis Center put together. The Magis Center says that they exist, quote, to turn the rising tide of unbelief in our culture through contemporary, rational, and science-based evidence. They're like an online apostolate thing. And this is a presentation about the miracle of Buenos Aires. Let me zoom in a little bit. you'll notice that it says Dr. Castanon Gomez was a former atheist convert to Catholicism, and then he becomes an active proponent of Eucharistic theology. Now we should hear it from the man himself.
Y esas cositas empezaron a mover digamos, los cimientos endebles de mi ateísmo.
So those websites referred to him as an atheist in his youth, and he described himself as an atheist in his youth. The man does have a PhD, so Kevin, what are you getting so worked up about? Well, let's back up a little bit in conversation. What exactly was causing Dr. Gomez to start to doubt his atheism?
Y luego el 95, en una ciudad de Bolivia que se llama Cochabamba, otra imagen de yeso empezó a exudar una sustancia rojiza. Y eso fue más dramático. Ahí yo ya no pensé que eran, digamos, poderes mentales.
Dr. Castanon Gomez spent the first 5 minutes or so of his appearance on that talk show talking about how back when he was an atheist scientist, he was investigating crying statues because he thought that people with psychic powers could cause statues to cry. And in case you think that I am picking one little line out of the first 5 minutes, and maybe you don't think that like poderes mentales actually means like psychic powers, the way that I kind of translated it, let me play a clip with a little bit more context.
La prensa hablaba de una imagen de un Cristo que tenía efusión de lágrimas cristalinas. La gente dice que lloraba el Cristo. Nosotros técnicamente decimos efusión al brote de una sustancia, porque no puedo decir que llora porque no sé si es lágrima y no sé si es sangre. Entonces yo dije, si esa imagen tiene efusión de lágrimas cristalinas, eso no puede ser en una imagen de yeso. Debe ser que la dueña de la imagen o alguien en esa casa tiene alguna capacidad mental, cerebral, psíquica, paranormal. Y yo quisiera estudiar esos poderes mentales, ¿no?
¿No pensaste que atrás le ponía alguna manguerita para poner agua? ¿No? Tú fuiste un poco más allá.
Sí, no pensé en la malicia de la gente en ese momento.
Esa mujer de esa casa, en su mente ha de suceder algo que provoca que esa imagen tenga una efusión de lágrimas cristalinas. ¿Tú pensaste eso?
Yo sabía que era una mujer porque la entrevistaban en la prensa, pero yo pensé que era porque ella tenía algunos poderes mentales. Estoy hablando de los años 90.
If you ask me, that doesn't make Dr. Ricardo Castanon Gomez an atheist scientist. It makes him an atheist paranormal investigator. And yeah, I mean, he probably didn't believe in God. But he did believe in wacky things like psychic powers that can cause statues to cry. Let's not pretend like this guy used to be this hyper-rationalist, hyper-skeptic. He was never a skeptic. I don't think he was ever a rationalist. He just changed from being an atheist paranormal investigator to being a Catholic paranormal investigator. Speaking of crying statues, a lot of Catholics have expressed skepticism in crying statues. Jimmy Akin has, like he did in episode 99 of his excellent podcast, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, on Our Lady of Akita.
This is a recent phenomenon in the history of the church. It doesn't have a parallel in the Bible or in the church fathers. And when recent cases have been examined, some have been shown to be fakes. In fact, it's easy to see how cases of a weeping statue or icon could be faked using an eyedropper or a syringe.
But this crying statue seemingly played some kind of role in Dr. Castanon Gomez's conversion to Catholicism from his atheism. And for the record, that word conversion is thrown around a lot, but I never heard Dr. Castanon Gomez say, like, then I went and got baptized or I entered RCIA or anything like that. He is Bolivian, and today Bolivia is like 70% Catholic, so I wouldn't be surprised if he was like a cultural Catholic. He's still an atheist, of course. You know, as much as I'm an agnostic, but also I was baptized, I'm sure that Dr. Castanon Gomez was the same. So I don't think that's terribly important, but I just thought it was worth clarifying that I think that word conversion is probably more accurately reversion. Again, I don't think that matters. I just thought I would clarify. Anyway, it seems that Jimmy Akin would be skeptical of Dr. Castanon Gomez, since Dr. Castanon Gomez thinks that crying statues are legit, while Jimmy Akin does not. Jimmy isn't the only person, though, who seems skeptical of Dr. Castanon Gomez. Even Dr. Franco Serafini, the author of A Cardiologist Examines Jesus, seems to be skeptical of Dr. Castanon Gomez. Let me read from pages 42 and 43. In 1992, he, being Dr. Castanon Gomez, began to take an interest in mystical phenomena from a medical point of view, starting off with skeptical opinions and then ending up as a Catholic convert. At the time he was involved, there was certainly no shortage of research material, quote unquote, for him, especially in South America. Apparitions, miracles, stigmata, weeping or bleeding statues. In a Fox interview in 1999, he stated that he followed 50 cases but could only exclude a supernatural origin in 6 of them. Unfortunately, browsing the list of the most famous visionaries he studied, Nancy Fowler, Patricia Talbot, Julia Kim, Catalina Rivas, I personally would reverse his proportion of genuine to sham cases. This subject of fake mystical phenomena, or truly inexplicable phenomena whose origins can and likely are diabolical, is certainly an interesting one, although it would deserve a detailed discussion that I will not pursue here. So Dr. Franco Serafini thinks that of the 50 cases that Dr. Castanon Gomez looked into, 6 are probably legit and 44 are fake, while Dr. Castanon Gomez thinks that 44 are authentic and only 6 are fake. Roughly speaking, of course. It seems like that's like a pretty big difference between Dr. Castanon Gomez and Dr. Serafini here. But true to his word, Dr. Serafini doesn't really talk about this much in the rest of the book. He does bring up something that I'll bring up in a moment, but to me, this makes me think that Dr. Castanon Gomez's work would be tainted for Dr. Serafini, and that Dr. Serafini would be like, yeah, I don't really trust anything that this guy touches. But that isn't really the case. Dr. Castanon Gomez plays a huge role in both the Eucharistic miracles of Buenos Aires and at Tixla, which I haven't discussed in this video series yet. So I can see why Dr. Serafini wouldn't want to dwell here. I don't think that he thinks that Dr. Castanon Gomez is entirely untrustworthy. I think that he is somebody who does really good work on the Eucharistic miracles and then awful work everywhere else. That's the impression that Dr. Serafini gives me regarding his opinion of Dr. Castanon Gomez. Something like even a broken clock is right twice a day. Dr. Castanon Gomez, according to Dr. Serafini, this is how I read him, thinks that Dr. Castanon Gomez is a broken clock. But hey, he was right about Tixla and he was right about Buenos Aires. I highlighted a name, though, when I was reading that list to you, Julia Kim. In that same interview that I was quoting from before, Dr. Castanon Gomez spends some time talking about Julia Kim.
Pero de ahí me fui a Nayu, por eso me confundí, a Nayu, Corea, a la casa de Julia Kim, que tenía otra imagen de la Virgen que exudó 700 veces. Oh. Ellos hicieron estudios, yo no participé, lo que yo estaba haciendo es reunir casuística, y ellos demostraron que la sangre era humana también y tenía ADN humano, y cuando recibieron los resultados, yo viajé con ellos a Seúl, a la Universidad de Seúl, para poder acompañarles, y estuve con el genetista que les dijo que había ADN humano y que era sangre humana.
¿Viste que la hermana Agnes murió?
The reason why Dr. Castanon Gomez said that he was confused when he accidentally said Nayu, Korea, is because he was also talking about Sister Agnes Sasagawa, the seer of the apparition of Our Lady of Akita, which was in Akita, Japan, not in Nayu, Korea. So that's just why he apologized there. But Dr. Castanon Gomez thinks that the Julia Kim stuff is legit because they found human DNA in the sweat from the image of Our Lady that Julia Kim owned. Well, what does Dr. Serafini think about all of this? Julia Kim, also known as Julia Yoon, her maiden name, is a Korean woman whose life since 1985 has been showered by an uninterrupted sequence of mystical experiences, visions, and private messages associated with phenomena seen by bystanders. Communion wafers have been raining down in her presence, statues have been moving around, blood has been flowing from sacred images, and perfumes have been smelled. However, what the Nayu seer is most well known for is a particularly excessive and, please allow me to say, frankly disgusting type of Eucharistic miracle. Communion host, who knows if validly consecrated, transformed themselves in her mouth into fresh into fresh flesh and blood, which Julia swallows with disarming ease, without perhaps first showing what's in her mouth to those who are presently around her, or better, to the lens of a photographer's camera. All of Julia Kim's spirituality has been repeatedly condemned by the Catholic Church hierarchy for a series of good theological reasons on which I will not dwell, to the point that whoever follows her is subject to excommunication. My reason for mentioning Julia is that in the autumn of 2006, 9 blood samples collected between 1995 and 2006 were actually analyzed twice at Human Pass Inc., a laboratory in Seoul. These were samples of blood taken from sacred images or hosts that had bled or rained down. Alternatively, the blood was directly collected in the seer's bedroom or even gifted to her by Jesus himself in a handkerchief, and so forth. Well, 9 complete and impeccable reports were obtained that unanimously stated beyond all doubt that the blood was human, genetically male, and belonged to the same person. For future reference, before this could be deleted from the Korean website nayumeri.or.kr, I transcribed the genetic profile that was obtained, which is substantiated by credible photographic evidence. I would like to remind the possibly baffled reader that according to popular wisdom, there is no such thing as a perfect crime. To the same reader, I should also point out that if we enter this genetic profile into the algorithm I mentioned in the previous section on the tunic of Argen2, we would obtain the following ethnic results. Population region probability: Asia 73.4%, Sub-Saharan Africa 13.1%, and Eurasia 12.6%. Julia Kim didn't want to tell us, but we just discovered that her Jesus was, in all likelihood, Korean. So yeah, Dr. Castanon Gomez really seems to be a nut. One who believes crazy things like psychic powers that allow people to make statues cry. And he's also not afraid to omit information when publicly presenting, such as the fact that he omitted the fact that Julia Kim's Jesus had Korean DNA in the talk show that we were watching. And if Dr. Castanon Gomez is admitting this, then what else might he be omitting in his non-peer-reviewed books about Eucharistic miracles, such as the miracles at Buenos Aires and Tixla? And we know that he has admitted to testing into compliance anyway. So if he's admitting that, like, what is he leaving out? And we'll never know because his work is not peer-reviewed. And what's really frustrating, too, is that the church never seems to get serious about the scientific research on these miracles. I have a theory as to why. I think that the church is kind of scarred from that Nature article on the shroud that came out in, like, 1980 or whatever that was, the original carbon dating. And truthfully, I think that the church just has nothing to gain from doing real science anyway. Not at least when the church has the option of letting Catholic-friendly investigators do their work, which gives the appearance of science, but is really only apologetics and propaganda. That about wraps up this video. This one is hopefully shorter than the others, but serves as a good midpoint in my video series covering A Cardiologist Examines Jesus. The next video will be on the miracles at Tixla, the second miracle series for which Dr. Castanon Gomez was involved, which does mean that he was selected even after all of this testing into compliance, the Julia Kim stuff, all of that. Why he was selected to lead the Tixla investigation? Well, that will be the subject of my next video. But until that video comes out, thanks all.